For Crema Media's Polity, I'm Sane Dlamini. Researcher and analyst Professor Raymond Suttner joins me to discuss what is at stake in demanding formal educational qualifications in democratic politics. Welcome, Raymond.
Thank you.
The issue of John Steenhuisen has raised many discussions around whether people who are in politics do require formal education. What do you think?
Well, they raise not formal education, but whether they should have a degree. I think it is a mistaken understanding of what it means to be able to do your job. They downplay the importance of experience, and they treat having a certificate as being the only signifier of being educated, whereas it is a signifier of formal education. I am not holding any brief for John Steenhuisen, but I feel it's very important for society that we respect a whole lot of people who are the bearers of wisdom. Some of them are old people who have a lot of things to tell us that can guide us in our lives and things like that. And I think it's very important that we don't treat degrees as the only important thing. But in politics especially, in the history of South Africa, a lot of people who have been very famous in the liberation struggle had very little formal education, yet they were theorists and great strategists, like I mentioned Kotane and Sisulu.
You've also mentioned the fact that many commentators, they see problems caused by former President Jacob Zuma, were primarily because he was not educated. Is that necessary?
No, not formally educated. I'm saying Jacob Zuma may have been illiterate, but that doesn't mean he's not educated. My point is that he was no fool. He understood a lot of things. He understood very well what he was doing, and I've never benefited a great deal from talking politics with him, but he had a clear understanding of how to engage in politics, and I think the problems we had with Zuma have got nothing to do with Zuma's lack of formal education. They've got to do with failure to observe regularity in government, state capture, corruption, things like this, and patriarchal behavior. Those have got nothing to do with degrees. You can have all the degrees in the world and behave that way as well.
You also say that John Steenhuisen's supporters have missed the point raised by many people that it's easier for white people to ascend to high office with or without academic qualifications. Can you elaborate on that?
Well, you know, in a lot of people assume, well, there's what's called social capital, and when someone wants to get a job and they're a white person, most job givers, people advertising jobs in this country, remain white people, well-paid jobs, and they may well know the families, things like that. And you may well find that someone, because they have these contacts and they don't have degrees and things like this, they are treated as having qualities that are necessary for the job because they're part of a circle that is assumed to be reliable for a job. In the case of black people, you know, people manipulate this thing. If you've got a degree, they say, but what experience have you got? If you've got experience, they say, but what degree have you got? And it seems to work in the favor of white people, and most unemployed people or black people, which bears that out.
You're also arguing that formal education is not the same as education.
Yes, well, that's what I've been saying
Yes.
all the time. Yes.
And can you also speak about the fact that you've said all political parties, they do perform an educational role? I'm sure you've been in government. How is that possible?
But that's not a government question. It's when you join a political party, you have to be acquainted with the policies, the ethical principles and things like that. And if you do something which they see as wrong, they have to point you to certain principles of the party. Now, in the ANC and the Communist Party of the past, there were particular processes of induction. When I got involved, at first people were taken on as probationary members. This was underground. And they would see for 6 months or so whether you ought to become a member, and they would test you out. But in that process, you were being taken through instruction, what we called induction, into the ANC or the Communist Party. And that continued into the 1990s when I was head of political education in the ANC, and in even into the 21st century in Gauteng. They had a series of courses. They actually gave certificates to people. I don't know to what extent the EFF, the DA have this. My impression is that, judging from what the rank and file of the EFF say, doesn't seem to be much political education. I don't know to what extent there is in the DA. But all parties, Gramsci refers to the party playing an intellectual role. It presents ideas to the public. But my feeling is that the ANC used to present intellectual, pedagogic leadership, and that has become more limited.
As a political analyst, Raymond, lastly, are we likely to see more of such arguments that might divert the issues of politics, like we've seen with the DA mocking John Steenhuisen about education instead of discussing important issues while we are leading up to the elections?
You know, I think that it's a product of divisions within the organization, and also the frustration that some black people in the DA feel that it's a white-controlled party, and one of the things that they grasped onto was this. And I'm not pleased to be rising to the defense of John Steenhuisen. I don't agree with some of the things that he does, or a lot of things that the DA in general does. But we may see more of this because there is jockeying for positions on the lists to go to Parliament, things like that. So you see things in the ANC, you see them in all parties, but they may not be exactly the same as this.
Thank you, Raymond.
Thank you.
That was Professor Raymond Suttner speaking to Creamer Media's Polity about what is at stake in demanding formal educational qualifications in democratic politics.